Today is episode 7 with Dr. B.
Welcome to the Harness Your ADHD Power podcast. If you're looking for a fresh perspective and actionable steps on hot topics from focus to follow through to self-management and more, you are in the right place. Welcome your host, innovative educator, coach, and psychotherapist, Dr. B.
Hey, AD dears. So glad that you could join me today for my 7th podcast episode. Today's episode is about taking the feeling of overwhelm out of having so much homeless stuff and helping you gain some control and some peace of mind. How much time do we have? Not much. So let's get to it. For those of you living with lots of homeless stuff, things like stacks and piles and boxes and bags of personal possessions, it clutters your mind, not just your space. You know, it's hard to think clearly when your space isn't clear. And all this homeless stuff might even be keeping you from inviting people into your space due to feelings of shame or embarrassment. You may have even attempted to find homes or give homes to your stuff, and even the thought of it overwhelms you and gets you derailed. You know, this isn't a Nike, just do it. Even if others don't understand, you know that it is so much more than just putting everything away. Otherwise, you would have done it long ago. Let me explain. Your brain looks at this homeless situation differently because it's wired, activated, and motivated differently than the non-ADHD brains of the world. In fact, your brain is so creative that it can transform a task that would actually take 30 minutes into one that takes hours. How could that be? One reason might be because it's resizing and adding things to the task. The task ends up looking huge due to its resizing, one that'll take hours, not minutes. Your brain tells you all of the things that you have to do the task, like, sure, you want to clean up your bedroom and you want to vacuum the floor so you don't continually have to step over things, so that you don't trip on things. But you don't have any empty hangers or drawer space or shelf space and you're going to need to either give away things or go to the store and buy what you need. And you know that if you leave the house and you go to the store, you know that you're going to end up getting distracted on the way to the store or even in the store, and end up buying other really cool looking things. And by the time that you get back to your task, hours will have passed and you'll need to get on to something else, or you'll totally have lost interest in the original task. Does this sound anything like you? Now, maybe this isn't exactly what happens to you, or maybe it is. Point is, did you get to the task, sort out your stuff, so that you know how many hangers that you do need for your clothes or storage space for your other possessions and how you want them to be organized or accessible to you? Of course not. The visual overwhelm of seeing all the stuff could be what's shutting down your brain and you feel glazed over or in a fog. You'll hear more about this in one of today's stories. Let's look at this from a different point of view. Everything that you own requires maintenance, which costs you time, effort, and energy. So the more stuff you have, the more time, effort, and energy that you have to spend, unless you decide to not maintain anything. And then you might not even be able to enjoy what you actually have. I believe that life should be as enjoyable and streamlined as possible, given whatever the circumstances are that we experience, and that making our lives harder because of poor habits or no strategies just doesn't make sense. Not only does the homelessness of your stuff impact your life, it also impacts the lives of those that you interact with, whether those are family members, coworkers, or friends. I'm looking beyond just you and thinking community. Because if you're stressed out due to your clutter, then your stress is most likely affecting others. As I've said so many times before, I'm a work in progress just like you. I have slips where not everything gets back home by their curfew time. However, I have systems in place so that an occasional slip doesn't result in an avalanche of clutter and chaos. And since I wasn't born knowing how to do all of the things that I now know how to do that quiet my challenges and make the most of my gifts, and neither were you, so long as you're teachable, you can learn just like I did. We're getting close to the 3 important points: relevant stories, an action step, and a favorite quote of mine. So let's keep going. In this episode, I want to help you to get out from underneath of the emotional and psychological burden or sense of overwhelm that's generated by living with lots and lots of homeless stuff, and help you gain some control and peace of mind. And knowing is only the first step. The next step is taking action on what you know to get new results. So please, don't let yourself off the hook here. Today's 3 important points are how to calm the sense of overwhelm that you might be experiencing when you even begin to think about homes for all your stuff, and why trying to get organized and give homes to things could be taking so much time, and how homelessness of stuff can lead to other problems, especially when you're unaware of how others are impacted by this behavior pattern.
This podcast is sponsored by Pure Potential with Dr. B. You can head over to drbarbaracohen.com and find the podcast show notes, grade free content from Dr. B, plus programs and services. That's drbarbaracohen.com.
Now back to being an adult with ADHD in today's world. And just in case you go feeling all bad about yourself for having lots of homeless stuff and perhaps ruin your day, I want you to remember that you are not what you do or don't do or even have. You're more than that. We are not defective or less than as people, as human beings. We're just wired differently. And hence we need a different explanation, understanding, and approach to the day-to-day things that others aren't necessarily struggling with. It's my hope that you'll learn some of what you need here. It's almost story time, but first, you need a win. You need to remember and acknowledge and celebrate at least one thing that is good about you or has gone right for you today. Just one thing. Perhaps it's your radiant smile, or maybe it's your laugh that just gets other people laughing, or going the extra mile on something for yourself or someone else, or maybe you tend to garden and your crops or your flowers are doing well. Whatever you choose is up to you. However, I want you to choose something right now and celebrate it, either aloud or to yourself. I want you to have a win and acknowledge that at least one thing has gone right in your day, is right about you, even if you're buried under a ton of homeless stuff. That fact does not take away from the fact that at least one thing has gone right today or is right with you. Got it? Good. So let's shift gears now to our first story. Once upon a time, there were personal possessions that lived with Aaron. They weren't very happy possessions because they hardly ever got seen or touched by Aaron because he lost sight of them, lost track of them, didn't even remember that he had them. They were abandoned and couldn't serve their purpose in his life. Aaron's possessions tried to be understanding and thought that someday he would get around to creating a system for his possessions based on the idea of Dr. B's Where Things Live. But alas, that was not their fate so far. They longed to live with other possessions like themselves and to be able to be found easily. Didn't seem to be asking for much. If only Aaron would give each and every one of them an address and send them home at the end of each day, life would work so much better. But alas, no homes were forthcoming for the personal possessions. So instead of life being relatively easy for Aaron, it was chaotic and stressful. He could never lay his hands on what he needed when he needed it, and obviously couldn't tell someone else where to find what they needed either, because most all of his possessions were homeless. It's not that Aaron wanted to live amongst piles and stacks of stuff. He didn't, but he just couldn't see an entry point to get started. When he looked at everything that needed to be put away or given away, he couldn't even focus on a small piece of it. Rather, it grew right before his very eyes into a monster that he had no idea how to tame and bring under control. He flooded with feelings of overwhelm. His brain began to shut down or freeze up, and this led to feelings of sadness and despair about his life. He felt tremendous shame about how he was living and his inability to tackle the task by taking one thing at a time and making a decision. Either give it away, keep it, and give it a permanent home. On the surface of it, this seemed like such a simple task, yet it wasn't for him. And worse yet, he couldn't even begin to entertain the thought of dating someone when his environment was such a disaster. How could he possibly bring anyone home with him? Many of his friends had volunteered to help him get his place in order so that he could move forward with his life. Yet the idea of allowing his friends into his space was unnerving. Aaron hadn't really been truly honest with his friends about the degree of the problem that he had with accumulating so much stuff over the years. And he did not want his friends to know about this part of his life. It felt too intimate and too raw. He had papers and books and magazines and mail and clothes and tools and receipts and whatever else that he had, years and years of it. He didn't know what was relevant to his life now and what he could let go of, and so he was frozen, stuck. Are you relating to Aaron? Some background stuff. Let's start by defining the word overwhelm so that we have common meaning in mind when we're considering what we can do about it. Overwhelm is a strong feeling. It's giving a huge amount of something to someone, too much of something to someone, to inundate them, to be overcome completely in mind or feeling. You get the point. Looking at why this feeling or sense of overwhelm arises, by definition, it would seem that too much is given, too much stimulus, at one time for the person to process and take an action on. They get flooded and shut down. So, if that's what's behind the feelings of overwhelm, what do we do to prevent it? How do we help Aaron to not feel overwhelmed by the mere thought of tackling his stuff? First, we need to make sure that he isn't getting too much at once. Too much of what? Well, it could be thoughts, visual stimulation, the number of steps, whatever registers as too much for Aaron. So let's say that it's too much visual stimulation for this example. When Aaron looks at the piles and stacks and things that he needs to give homes to, he gets overwhelmed. It's visual. What Aaron sees when he gets overwhelmed is mountains of stuff to make decisions about. And not only is he challenged by feelings of overwhelm, he's also challenged about making decisions, good decisions, that is. So this is a double whammy for Aaron. One quick and easy way to eliminate the excessive visual stimulation that he's experiencing would be to cover up all of the stuff with sheets or blankets or whatever will cover them so that what is seen is one big pile of stuff without a bunch of little details. And mind you, this is not about being in denial and escaping what's there. It's just a strategy. And we can help Aaron to make positive meaning out of the one big pile instead of a negative one. That underneath the blanket or sheet is his stuff that he isn't able to attend to because he sees too much of it all at once. And the sheet or the blanket serves as a visual buffer for Aaron. He can remove one item or a few items from underneath the blanket or the sheet at one time and either throw them away, give them away, or keep them and give them homes. This will require Aaron to have the ability to make these decisions. And if he can't, then we know that the underlying problem isn't just visual overwhelm, it's that Aaron's decision-making abilities are lacking. and he'll need to focus on improving this skill first before he tackles giving homes to his stuff. In fact, this might be the problem all along that has actually stopped Aaron from giving homes to his things. Are you relating to Aaron's story? Transitioning to our next story. Cynthia's story picks up where Aaron's left off. She had a horrible time making decisions, just like Aaron. In fact, the thought of needing to make a decision threw her into a panic. She had a history of making very poor decisions that caused her a great deal of trouble in her life, whether these decisions were about her health, her career, her personal relationships, how she spent her money, or the things she began to accumulate over the years that had no homes. Growing up, no one had ever taken the time to teach Cynthia an effective strategy for making good decisions, and so she just made decisions and hoped for the best, which usually wasn't what happened. Cynthia made decisions about where her things would live in kind of a reactive way. She didn't have a plan or criteria for her decisions, she just made them. And since her decisions weren't well thought out before they were made, she found herself making decisions about the same things over and over again, kind of like a Groundhog Day. A typical day for Cynthia was getting to work late because she had gone to sleep too late the night before, because she didn't want to move all the stuff off of her bed once again so that she had some place to sleep. When Cynthia got home, she didn't have a set place or a home for her purse or keys or anything, so she just tossed them on the couch, where they blended in with the rest of the stuff that was piled up on the couch. This was already a disaster waiting to happen when it was time to look for her keys and purse to leave the house. But I digress. Cynthia had a favorite chair that she loved to sit in and look around her space at all the things that she had that were stacked up in piles. She had created a pathway of piles so she could maneuver her way around her space without having to step on her things. It was actually quite creative of her. She could sit in her chair and stare at her things for hours without moving to do anything with them. Not only would it take effort for her to move and engage, she would have to make decisions to move and the decision to engage. That's how bad things had gotten for her. After hours of sitting and staring, Cynthia made a decision to tackle some of her papers. She grabbed a huge stack from the middle of the floor and moved it over closer to her chair. She proceeded to start sorting her papers by some arbitrary method until she ended up with several piles from the original pile. Feeling satisfied with her efforts, she stopped, and the new little piles remained on the floor without a final destination, because Cynthia didn't know where to put them. She only knew how to sort them, which is why she stopped where she did. Some background information. What we say or think the problems are rarely end up being what the real problems or challenges are. And without getting to the real problem, it's hard to have a real solution instead of a Band-Aid. From Cynthia's story, you learn that she didn't necessarily have a problem making decisions at one level. She could decide or sort the differences between the papers that she was able to sort through. She saw the patterns or the purpose of them, and she could separate them by their differences and group them according to their similarities. However, that's where her abilities stopped. She didn't know where to put the papers after she finished sorting them. The internal conversation went something like this. Should all insurance policies be put together in one file? Or should there be a file for policies for auto insurance, life insurance, medical insurance, pet insurance? And should the policies and bills be kept together or separate? And how long should they be kept? Is 10 years too long? Is 1 year too short? And oh, by the way, what the heck is the purpose or reason for keeping all these papers in the first place? Do you have the kind of conversations with yourself that Cynthia does? And are they in part what derails you or stops you from moving forward with what you know needs doing? Transitioning to our next story. Sally is one of 3 kids raised in a family with a non-ADHD dad and an ADHD mom. Her dad is pretty organized, follows through on things, and is about at his wit's end in his marriage. Sally's mom has never been formally diagnosed, and even though she knows that she has 3 kids who all have ADHD, it doesn't seem to occur to her that genetically speaking, she is the most likely candidate for their ADHD. Sally's mom has lived her whole life with symptoms of distractibility, disorganization, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. And like many females, one way that her hyperactivity shows itself is with her talking incessantly. She also has huge challenges with decision-making, which is part of the reason that she came to own so much stuff and it became homeless. She just couldn't decide where things should live. And she was too embarrassed to ask for help because she was ashamed of herself for not knowing how to keep her home organized at her age. So she ended up creating a facade of indifference for emotional protection. When her mom first began to notice that Sally was showing signs of the same behaviors that she had, she was horrified that she had passed this on to Sally. But instead of confronting and correcting the problems, her mom just ran away into a fantasy world where she didn't have to deal with the problems. So as time passed, 2 of her kids manifested more and more challenges with too much stuff, and one manifested signs of OCD as a way to cope with the anxiety of becoming like her mother. Sally and her 2 siblings were embarrassed by their mother's behaviors, both inside and outside their home. It was hard for them to agree to go places as a family because of their aversive feelings about mom's behaviors. They all felt frustrated that mom just didn't seem to be open to listening to how her behaviors were impacting her kids and things that she could do or learn to do to help herself make changes. Sally's mom seemed dismissive of her kids' comments and oblivious as to how disruptive she was to others. She had long since accepted, "This is how I am," and learned to live with it. She knew that she couldn't sit still and was always fidgeting with something. Her hair, her purse, her clothes. She always had to be doing something. Fidgeting helped her to stay focused, and no one seemed to believe her when she said that. Rather, they criticized her for her fidgetiness and told her to sit still. Her timing, her sense of timing was off too. Not only did she appear to be unaware of the passing of time, she also appeared to be disrespectful to others because she was constantly changing her mind and hence her plans. She looked like she was acting as if she was the only person affected by her decisions, when in fact, this was not the case. Little did Sally's mom or anyone else know that she had a real challenge with seeing or acknowledging the presence of others in her life. She could mostly see herself, not others, and so of course it follows that she wouldn't be considering others when she couldn't really see them. Sally's mom had no idea of the problems that she was creating for her kids by not addressing so many challenges that she had, and especially the homelessness of stuff. Her kids were growing up ashamed of their mom and their home, too embarrassed to invite other kids over after school because of the questions they knew that were waiting for them. They never wanted to ask their mom to drive them places with friends because they could never count on the fact of whether or not mom would actually show up to drive them or have gotten distracted by something else and completely forgotten about them and their friends who were waiting. I'm sure it was not Sally's mom's intention to pass along hurtfulness to her kids, yet that is exactly what was happening. Some background information. Not only did Sally's mom need to change her mindset about the impact she was having on her loved ones, her family needed to change their mindset about the meaning they were giving to mom's behaviors. Sally's mom had attached a meaning to her possessions as one of calmness and protection. The more that she possessed, the more calmness and protection she felt. Putting away her possessions implied that her calmness and protection were being put away too, and only could be taken out as needed. And since Mom was a highly anxious woman, she felt the need for calmness and protection most all the time, not just here and there. The meaning that Dad made out of Mom and her seemingly disrespectful ways was that she just didn't seem to care who she offended, so long as she got what she wanted. It's true that she was focused on getting what she wanted, or rather what she needed, but it was never her intention to offend those she loved. It just couldn't be helped if she was to get what she needed to remain calm and protected. Sally and her siblings made the meaning that their mother was unwilling to change her ways, and they were doomed to be impacted by her in a negative and hurtful way for the rest of their lives. You know, the cost of keeping secrets and inferring meaning without asking if we're correct has a huge cost, both to the doer and to the receivers, or those that are affected. Most of us jump to meanings and conclusions rather than staying open to what unfolds because of the uneasiness of uncertainty. We'd rather feel certain, even when we're wrong, than experience uncertainty and wait to know. Once Dad, Sally, and her siblings could learn to tolerate their uncertainty and discomfort, as well as be willing to share a little with Mom about their own shame-based or embarrassing moments, Mom didn't feel quite so alone and was willing to open up to them a little bit at a time and share some of her own. The result of this shift in approach contributed to a closer and more understanding family, as well as small changes that were making a difference for everyone. It takes conscious effort and great ingredients to shape a mind into the extraordinary life partner that we need in order to achieve the goals that we have. Some action steps. It's your responsibility to get the information and training you need. In other words, your ability to respond to your needs and to meet them. If you're like Aaron and experience a sense of overwhelm when you even begin to think about homes for all your stuff, your action step has 3 parts. Focus on what is too stimulating for you when you focus on it, and can you cover it up with a sheet or a blanket? Follow through on making a plan to tackle 1 or 2 things at a time, so to stay under the radar of the feelings of overwhelm. Make appointments with yourself and keep them for these 1 or 2 things each time. And self-management. Know that whatever feelings come up when you're about to take that first step to give homes to things and actually take it, those feelings will pass. It's your job to have ways to manage those feelings so that they don't stop you. One way to manage them is to look at the meaning that you're giving to them and stay focused on only the 1 or 2 things at a time. If you're like Cynthia and trying to get organized and give homes to things takes you so much time, your action step has 3 parts. Focus on know the 3 options that you need to decide in advance and only focus on them. Toss out, give away, or keep and give homes. Following through, make sure to get a trash bag for all that gets tossed out, a bag for all that gets given away, and make a pile or a section on the floor for all that is kept and will be given homes. In self-management, perhaps get a friend to be your body double and just have them sit there reading a book or doing something while you do your sorting. It can be very emotionally grounding to have another person's energy to connect with while you work. And if you're like Sally and her family, and someone is unaware of how others are impacted by the homelessness of their stuff, which is leading to other problems, your action step has 3 parts. Focus on what are the real issues, not assumed issues of each person in the family. Identify them for the next step. Following through, set up time and actually meet as a family to talk about your respective challenges how they're impacting the family, and what you see you can do about them. Share with one another. In self-management, be sure to hold your tongue and keep your emotions in check so that you seek to understand the others first before you express yourself and get into your story. It might just change your point of view and what you say. A favorite quote for today. Albert Einstein wrote, "Out of clutter, find simplicity. From discord, find harmony. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity." The question I have for you at this point of our journey together is, what is the opportunity that is sitting and waiting for you to recognize it today? I appreciate you showing up to listen today and in the future. New episodes will be available twice a week now, Mondays at 6 a.m. for this format and Thursdays at 6 a.m. for the Ask Dr. B format, both Pacific time. I'll be talking about such compelling topics as analysis paralysis, managing yourself within time, making friends, and more hot topics, as well as lining up guests to bring more great insights to you. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and keep coming back. In fact, if you received value today, please rate the show and leave a thoughtful review on iTunes so I know that I'm meeting your needs. That means a lot to me to know that your life is getting a little bit better every time we get together. And then make sure to get over to my website to get your show notes and learn more about other services. That is, if it's of interest to you. Until the next time, bye for now.
Thanks for your undivided attention. If you're hungry to make positive changes in your life, head over to drbarbaracohen.com and see how Dr. B can help you today. Whether you love making changes with one-to-one attention and community support, or on your own with self-study, or could benefit from coaching or psychotherapy, you'll find all the information right there at drbarbaracohen.com.